you mentioned eliminating the Department of Education, right? One of the candidates in the debate famously said he would eliminate, I think it was 3 departments. And the, would a Paul administration eliminate departments of government? I mean, would we see a reduction in the rate of increase in spending, or would you foresee?
I think it's the only way you can make government smaller is to eliminate some of the things that shouldn't be done at the federal level. Many of us, and particularly out of the Tea Party movement, believe strongly in the 9th and 10th amendments. If the Constitution doesn't enumerate this power, it isn't supposed to be done in Washington. It's supposed to be left to the states. By eliminating departments, you make your job a little easier. Because let's say, for example, you want to balance the budget next year. It would probably be a 30% across the board cut, something like that. I think we borrow 30, maybe even 40%. You know, we borrow 40% of every dollar. So if you said next year, well, I'm going to cut Medicare by 40% or Social Security by 40%, people would go crazy. And you probably could not get it through. But if you said instead, let's try to minimize what we do to Medicare and Social Security, maybe fix it through means testing, people who have more assets, give them less benefits, then you could do it, but you would have to eliminate entire departments. If you're not willing to eliminate entire departments, you can't get anywhere close to balancing the budget.
There's a, in 1994, when Republicans took over the House, the famous Republican Revolution, one of the big issues back then was Bill Clinton said, yeah, I want to balance the budget, but we need to do it cautiously and slowly. And Republicans at the time said, no, we need to balance the budget in 5 years. And I think they actually did it in 4 years. And there was they did manage to balance the budget. People today say, though, that maybe that's no longer possible, that balancing the budget in 5 years is impossible, balancing the budget maybe in 10 years is even impossible. Is that realistic?
I think unless you have a finite plan for balancing the budget within a finite period of time, that you're not credible. For example, I like a lot of the aspects of Paul Ryan's plan. I think he's a smart guy and has a lot to offer to the national debate. But at the same time, his plan doesn't balance for 28 years. We don't know how many of us are going to still be here in 28 years. We can't count on the next generation. I'm not sure we have 28 years, you know, to try to continue financing this massive debt. My dad has a plan that would balance in 3 years. I had a plan that would balance in 5 years. Pat Toomey had one in 8 years. My rule of thumb as to what I supported Pat Toomey, he's mine, and I support my dad, so there's not always just one answer, but they all had finite time periods. I also support the Connie Mack plan, which is the penny plan, which cuts 1% a year for 6 years, freezes and balances in 8. Just simply a freeze would probably balance in about 8 to 10. And the interesting thing about it is it shows you how fuzzy the math is in Washington, because if we go on the baseline of what they call spending, spending is going to increase $9 trillion over the next 10 years. So if you freeze it, the CBO will score that as a $9 trillion cut. Now you tell people in my state we're freezing spending, they just say, well, you're just not going to spend more than you spent last year. That sounds reasonable. But everybody else is like, oh, that's a $9 trillion cut. That's crazy. It's not a $9 trillion cut. All you're doing is erasing these imaginary spending increases that are coming. But that's what you need. And you're going to need something dramatic, because a lot of us truly fear. I was with your Senator Ayotte last night. She mentioned the European debt crisis. I mentioned it in my speech. Tom Coburn's mentioning it. Jim DeMint's mentioning it. A lot of us are very worried that a nation can get underwater the same way you get underwater in your home mortgage, that it's in Europe now, it's a contagion, it's coming here, and now that our debt, which is 15 trillion, equals our economy, which is 15 trillion, we're at a tipping point where we may get to where we can't pay for our debt.
So in more specific terms, balancing the budget is probably the critical part of your economic plan, the Paul administration economic plan. How exactly would you get there? What exactly would you
have to eliminate departments. I think my dad has talked about education, energy, commerce, interior. In our budget, and I'm not sure if my dad's is exactly the same, but our office did a budget. What we did is we took 4 or 5 departments and eliminated most of them, and left some things intact but put them in other departments. So for example, the Department of Energy does, I think, mostly bad things, but they do also have some nuclear regulatory function. We took that and just put it into the defense budget. It could be put into another budget, but you can eliminate all the overhead of Department of Energy. Department of Energy does some things that even Republicans approved of. Now we're all really mad with the president the current president over Solyndra and giving money to Mr. Kaiser, who's a billionaire, to fund Solyndra. I think one of the Kennedys down in Massachusetts got over $1 billion for Beacon Energy. All the Republicans are upset with these Department of Energy loans, but guess what? When we were in charge, we gave them out too. We just didn't give them to solar panel industry, we gave them to whoever the Republicans' friends were. So really we ought to eliminate stuff like that. There's no reason the Department of Energy should be telling you what kind of light bulbs you can have, what kind of showers you can have, and they shouldn't be loaning out monies to decide which businesses survive and which don't.